welcome back to the latest installment of our pregame show. How's it going, bro?
Yes. Pretty good. How are you doing this morning?
Oh, pretty good. Just, waking up bright and early,
Bright
trying
and
to get the
early
day
and
started talking about some Oklahoma football. We're going to let a few more people get in here, but we're going to start shortly. Make sure to hit the like button. Throw in your questions in the comment section. We will be going through those at some point during the stream. We're going to chat about today's game. We've had some big recruiting news. I think that's fair to say, right, Brum? Here, that's coming
very
up. Some stuff has been happening over the last couple of days since we recorded our last video. So we'll chat about that. Then we're just going to look around college football. Talk about the big games. Probably going to talk about Arkansas and A&M. I'm sure Brum's got a game or two that he wants to chat about, and then take your guys' questions. So, where do you want to start, Brum? Do you want to go with recruiting? You want to go with the game today?
we could start with just the game today. Just everyone. Yeah, David Hicks. Yeah, we'll be talking about him. His commitment date has been moved up. That is true. Significantly moved up, which is going to be a lot of fun to talk about. Welcome all of our members as well. I see a couple of you guys in here. Good morning. Today's game. I think that OU. I was actually watching a video a little bit earlier this morning. Colin Coward. I'm sure a lot of Oklahoma fans aren't big fans of Colin Coward. Colin Coward actually has Oklahoma as the second best team in college football. And it shocked me when I heard him say that. He's realizing that maybe Lincoln Riley, isn't the most well-rounded coach, and he realizes that Brent Venables has taken this team and is able to make them, what they are. But as far as this game, I think Oklahoma's going to show up, and I think being able to play in prime time, 7 o'clock, I think Brent Venables is going to have the guys ready to roll. I think Eric Gray is going to run wild. They're going to rely on him. And I really think you're going to see Dylan Gabriel take a next step as far as not missing. He made a few throws. I mean, overall, he played great against Nebraska. He did miss a few throws. I know Jalil Farouk. I'm hoping Jalil Farouk, speaking of him, takes the next step today. But I think this offense is going to be ready to roll. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I think we are going to see some good stuff out of Dylan and Eric. On the offensive side, I think, we got to look at the wide receivers. They're going to be really going to be needed to make some big plays. The Kansas State defense holds teams down, and if the wide receivers aren't able to get open, it's going to be a tough day, even if we can't establish the run really well. I still think Oklahoma's going to cover the spread. That was one of my bets for the weekend. It's because Kansas State's offense is not very good right now. Maybe Adrian Martinez is going to wake up and try to play today. But he really has had a tough stretch here over the start of the season. And, I mean, he didn't play terrible against Oklahoma last year. But I just don't think it's not the same Oklahoma. And to talk about what Colin Coward said, he definitely put us at number 2. He also started that segment off by mentioning his dad was an optometrist, so I think he's starting to go a little loony in the noggin. But I mean, it's definitely. I don't think we're quite there. I mean, it's cool that he's realizing that Oklahoma isn't a dumpster fire like he expected it to be when his boyfriend Lincoln Riley moved over to USC, but. I think he's overdoing it, and if Oklahoma stumbles at any point, we're gonna see a clip on Twitter, or if you guys watch the Colin Coward show, I tune in every once in a while. He's probably gonna say Oklahoma was a fraud whenever I ranked him at number 2. That would just be a thing for someone in his position to do. Maybe not. Maybe it is just because he's Colin Coward, but I could definitely see someone saying that on national TV. Taking it back by calling Oklahoma frauds later on in the season if if we were to stumble. Not that I would expect it, because this team doesn't really seem to have that mentality that it's had over the last few years. Especially if you listen to the players, they get excited about everything, for every week, and that's a good thing to see.
And did you know that Kansas State's OC, offensive coordinator, do you know who it is? Colin Klein. Do you remember watching Colin Klein play at quarterback for Kansas State? Felt like he never left. He was at Kansas State forever. This is his first year as the offensive coordinator, and I will say it's not off to the best start. Obviously, Deuce Vaughn will always be a threat, and he's going to be the focal point of this Oklahoma defense to shut down. We talked about in previous games and previous previews of there's a quarterback, there's a running back and a wide receiver to shut down. Well, this week it's Deuce Vaughn, and Deuce Vaughn has been shown to eat Oklahoma alive, and it's not so much on the ground. It's always been the short passes out of the backfield. Oklahoma couldn't tackle him in open, in space, and he would just eat Oklahoma alive. And I think, and we talked about it on Wednesday's show when we did the preview, I think Oklahoma's got the athletes to keep up with him. Now, is it going to be able to do one-on-one? Deuce Vaughn is very elusive, and it's going to have to be a couple guys are going to always have to be coming together on him. But I really think that between Stutzman, maybe Cannett get some playing time, Deshaun White, they're going to be all over Deuce Vaughn, even David Awegbu as well. The linebackers are going to always have an eye on where he's at. Now, say what you will about Adrian Martinez. Martinez hasn't had the best start to his year at Kansas State. He did eat Oklahoma alive pretty much whenever Nebraska came to town last year. But, it's hard to sometimes compare this team to, last year's team because it's totally different and it's not apples to apples. But Adrian Martinez it won't be scared coming into Norman. He's already been here once. I expect him to come in prepared, but I just don't think they have enough offensive firepower. And I don't know if it's because Colin Klein, it's his first year calling plays. Is it Adrian Martinez? Is it the fact that, they're leading receivers under 100 yards? I don't know. I just think it's a combination of all three things. And while Tulane, they lost to him last week, Tulane's 3-0. They've got a pretty good stout defense, but it is Tulane at the end of the day. And if Tulane can do that, Oklahoma should be able to take care of them, no problem.
Yeah, and we mentioned that Tulane game. I think it was on Wednesday's video. Maybe we kind of touched on it on yesterday's video, but I could definitely see that as a trap game for Kansas State, especially with a young offense that trying to maybe get ahead of themselves, not wanting to reveal too much with a young OC. I mean, we'll see what happens today. I really think that it's going to be a very similar start, or at least the feeling at the beginning of the game is going to be similar to the Nebraska game. If Nebraska, I think, at least I did. I don't want to speak for everyone, but it felt like there was a little bit of tension. If Nebraska was able to put multiple drives together like they did on their first scoring drive, personally, I wasn't worried after one, but if it was going to be a reoccurring theme, definitely would have been worried for the entire game, right? If they would have been able to put up two of those drives and just get 10 points, it probably would have been a little bit more of a stressful beginning to the game, but Oklahoma was able to shut it down. I think it's going to be similar today. If Deuce Vaughn and Adrian Martinez are able to kind of get something rolling and score once, I don't think it'll be a huge deal, but if they can start putting some decent drives down the field, that they don't essentially have to score, but if they can just start getting to the other side of the field, getting in the red zone, that'll be problematic. I think we got to make sure that, again, the linebackers, I think, here are going to be tested the most with having to track Deuce Vaughn. The cheetah position, probably going to be seeing a lot of Deshaun White. I hope we get to see a lot of Jaren Kanak. I think when I mentioned it in Wednesday's video, Kanik, I think, is the most athletically prepared to follow a Deuce Vaughn. Not that Deshaun White isn't an athlete in his own right. I just think Kanik's natural ability that we saw last week, again, him not knowing what he's doing is it being able to put up 12 tackles. Kind of exciting thing to think about when you hear Coach Venables say he's still raw and he led the team in tackles in a half, essentially.
It's going to be interesting to see what, does Cannon get the opportunity to play more since he got a little over half to play against Nebraska. And I think he does. I think he plays a decent amount. I think he's rotating with Deshaun White. And I don't necessarily think, because we've talked about it before, that Justin Harrington would probably be playing more if it was a pass happy team. And in my mind, this team is more of a running back, running oriented team. So I see more of the Deshaun White, Jaren Kanak show. So it'll be interesting to see, because I think you want Jaren Kanak on the field because of Deuce Vaughn. I mean, Deuce Vaughn is their guy on the offensive side, and he's elusive, and he's like Darren Sproles, and he's just been a pain in our side for the past, this will be the third year. And he's just someone that can carry that Kansas State offense. Also looking along the offensive line for Kansas State, Cooper Beebe, he's the left tackle for him. He is one of the best offensive linemen that, the best one that Kansas State has, and one of the best ones in the Big 12, and is projecting to be a top NFL draft pick. So you're going to see Ethan Downs, Reggie Grimes, Stripling, Jonah Lalu, whoever they line up there, maybe even R. Mason Thomas if he's healthy, go against Beebe, and you're going to see the quality that it's the highest quality offensive lineman that those defensive ends have gone against. So if they start beating them, then they're going to be able to start beating whoever they want in the Big 12, because BB is one of the best ones in the conference. And so it'll be interesting to see that left side, if whether it's Stripling or Downs or Grimes can get after him. That's going to be someone that we're going to have to keep an eye on. And then obviously we've talked about on Kansas State's defensive side, Uzama. He is by far the best defensive lineman that Oklahoma has faced to date. And he's someone that's going to draw a lot of attention to. Oklahoma's going to have to know where he's at all times along the offensive line, and lining up along the offensive line. You're going to have to, maybe double team him at times. Just you got to keep him off of Dylan Gabriel and keep him upright.
Yeah, and I saw a report. I can't remember what outlet it was, not really a report, an article mentioning that the matchup between Anton and Anudike Uzama is going to be one of the biggest prospect battles to watch this weekend. Both of them more than likely going into the draft after this year. Both of them potentially have, they have the potential to crack into the first round. More than likely going to be day 2 picks as of now. If one of them can put up a big performance in today's game, I think we're going to start hearing some buzz about how they could be, towards the bottom of the first round, and depending on the team, maybe mid-first rounders. I think it's tough to go all the way up to the top of the first round at least at Anton's position at this point, because if he was a top-tier first rounder, he'd probably already be in those conversations and mock drafts, way too early situations. But I think Anton can definitely crack into the bottom half of the first round if he has a lot of big games, especially a game like today where he's going to be challenged by a very talented rusher. Going to, let's talk about a couple of the guys that we expect to have a big game. I know we've kind of mentioned the linebackers in general, but do you have one or two guys on either side of the ball that you expect to be important for Oklahoma to win the game or have a big impact on today's game?
Yeah, not to state the obvious, but I feel like that Danny Stutzman is going to have a humongous game, because he is going to be the guy going sideline to sideline with Deuce Vaughn, and potentially whether Kanek or whoever's helping him out. I think you're going to see Danny Stutzman flying around per usual. He's going to be the key to try to contain Deuce Vaughn and keep him under control. Another thing with Danny Stutzman as well, they're going to have to probably spy Adrian Martinez, because Martinez is a mobile quarterback, and that is a quarterback type that Oklahoma struggled with last year. And it's the guy that can get out of the pocket, put a few moves and get upfield for 5-10 yards, and that's been a problem for Oklahoma. So whether Stutzman is going out for on Deuce Vaughn, and then or some he's doing a quarterback spy, he's going to rack up a ton of tackles today. I think that he's going to be the key, whether he's spying or going out over Deuce Vaughn. He's going to be the big time component of this defense, and he always will be. And I think Ethan Downs builds on what he had at Nebraska, and he starts really racking up the stat sheet. And I really think he's going to get after it. And, we talked about in the pregame video or preview video on Wednesday, who's to watch for Kansas State. And their quarterback, or not their quarterback, their wide receiver, Malik Knowles, he's 6'3". Does Kenai Walker play a lot today because he's huge? I'm curious to see what happens there. And I'm not saying that, Kenai Walker's going to be an impact player today, but that's something I'm really watching. As far as the offense, I want to see Eric Gray continue going where he's going with Major. I want to see this this running game, because that's going to be key down the stretch come November time. I think they will. And I want to see Jalil Farouk, and I think Jalil Farouk will build on his good game at Nebraska and build on to it and really start to kind of establish him as a true threat. What about you?
Yeah, so on the offensive side of the ball, just to stick there, I really want to see Marvin Mims be able to blow up this defense. I'm sure that they're going to be very cautious of not letting any big plays happen. I think we're going to be establishing the run early. Probably going to see, again, a similar start to the Nebraska game, trying to run the ball at first and then make some big plays downfield. Because if there's not a threat, that initial threat at the beginning with getting a few yards, they're just going to sit back and really just let the Oklahoma offense stay in front of them and try to not let anyone behind. That being said, Eric Gray, I think him and Marcus Major, just the running backs, they're going to need to have a big game for Oklahoma to be able to create those explosive plays today against this defense, because Kansas State is a defense that we need to respect. And then on the defensive side of the ball, I think it all starts with the linebackers and the defensive linemen. Reggie Grimes, to be specific, I think he was a little bit more quiet last game. He didn't have a terrible game. He still had a very productive game, but definitely quieter than the first two games of the season. And whoever is at the cheetah position, I think that is going to be the position that's going to be under a lot of stress all day. I really wouldn't be surprised if we saw both the starters, right, in Harrington and White out there rotating a lot, because Deuce Vaughn is going to just look like, I would assume they're going to try to use him kind of like Tyreek Hill is used in the NFL, just doing it, trying to do a lot of motion, trying to get the defense to second guess themselves. And again, hopefully seeing Jaren Kanak out there, I think the mix of those three is going to at least keep the Kansas offense a little, giving them a reason to second guess. Who's easier to run against, who's going to be better for them to pass against. I just think that position is going to be responsible for Deuce Vaughn. And if that position isn't performing at a high level, Deuce Vaughn more than likely going to have 150, maybe even 200 yards today, because that dude is explosive.
He is. And Wesley just commented, he's thanking us for the tickets, and definitely we hope you guys enjoy. And I'm glad that he's getting to go to his first game. That's pretty cool. I expect it to be a really cool environment, being prime time opening of Big 12 conference play. I hope you guys have a good time. And speaking of that, I mean, we're going to be giving away Kansas tickets. So we're going to be starting that giveaway here sometime soon. Granted, it's going to be a couple weeks before that comes around, but we'll probably give away a handful of tickets for that. So, you need to be subscribed and, like the videos and, stick around and do individual challenges and things like that. And we'll give tickets away to other people as well. But Wesley, I hope you guys have a good time.
Make sure to download the Oklahoma Sooners app. For whoever's going to the game tonight, since they're doing that light show in the third quarter, I believe it was. It's like you download the app and then the phone light turns on. It'll follow along with the music, so it'll be pretty cool. I think it'll be a really cool experience, especially for a first game.
Definitely.
Congrats.
Yeah, that'll be
that's really cool. Really cool to go to. Hopefully it'll be a cool memory to have. Well, let's move on. Let's talk about recruiting a little bit.
Should we give a score prediction?
Oh yeah, score prediction. Good call. I completely forgot about that. You want to start? You're normally a little better at having those off the top of your head than I am.
I think that OU takes care of Kansas State. I don't really think this game's close. I think it's similar to the Nebraska game where maybe Kansas State stops OU for a possession or two and maybe scores early. I really think that Oklahoma goes in, takes care of business. This is a better defense than Nebraska. I think OU probably ends up winning 38-14 tonight. 38-14.
38-14. I'm going to... Yeah, so 14. I think that's what Kansas State scores as well. I'm going to go with 45-14. I think at first it will be a little bit closer, but Oklahoma will pull away in the second half to ultimately make this look like it was never really a game. Going to be a good one. Definitely not going to be one that people should expect to win easily, but the offense, I think, is Lebby, again, is starting to be able to open up that playbook. Make it a little bit more confusing for the defense to play against. We'll see, but I expect Oklahoma to have a lot of points on the board. What do you want to do? Go on to recruiting. We have a couple questions on the team specifically.
We can do a couple questions and we can go recruiting. Either way, it doesn't matter to me.
Let's go a couple of questions first because I think these might be interesting. Has Jaden Rode played this year any? Going to the year, I think a lot of people, maybe not a lot, but our co-host Brandon, who's not here, off of basic, he expected Jaden Rode to, probably be on the field day one. Jaden, I don't believe has played. He might have gotten in late in a game, but I can't recall that he's actually put up a stat if he has been on the field. So
yeah, I don't believe so, and I believe he's going to be redshirted for sure.
Yeah, I think he's one of those redshirt candidates along with the other two linebackers in Kobe McKenzie and Kip Lewis. So definitely those guys are going to be impactful players later on in their career, just not year one. True freshmen are rarely going to be impactful year one. You got to have special talent or at a position where you need players. I think Jaren Kanak kind of fit in that spot of special talent and also needing depth, especially with the injuries that we've sustained at the linebacker position over the offseason. Let's see. Do you guys think that Georgia-Kent State game tells us anything this early? Yeah, I think it'll tell us that Georgia is the number one team in the country.
Yeah, I feel bad for Kent State. I mean, I guess I don't feel bad. They're getting a lot of money because they played Washington, Oklahoma, now Georgia. I mean, I think Georgia beats them 45, 50 points. I think that OU played them close because I still think that Oklahoma at the time that they were playing is still installing the offense and defense, and I still think they are. I don't even think they're done yet. I think it's pretty clear that Georgia's the number one team in the country. Brock Bowers is ridiculous. It's just going to be tough to beat Georgia. Not saying that Oklahoma can't do it down the road. I just don't think it says a whole lot other than the fact that Georgia's going to run them over and beat them by 40, 50 points today.
Agreed. Here, one last question, and then we're going on to recruiting talk. Do you think Theo needs a good game? I'm assuming that means today specifically.
I think he got a touchdown and later in that Nebraska game, and he looked pretty solid. I do think Theo needs a good game more for his confidence per se. I don't think his starting position's really a threat, or him being not heavily rotated is a threat if he doesn't have a good game. I mean, at the end of the day, he's competing against Marvin Mims, one of the best receivers in college football. But I think for his confidence, I think he does, and I think he can build off of what he did at Nebraska. I think he will. It's just part of the problem is not really a problem, but Oklahoma runs the ball a lot. They're still figuring it out on offense. So while Dylan Gabriel's look good, it's just it's way more balanced now. And so the number of, catches to go around is, not as much as maybe it was with Lincoln Riley. But I do think that Theo Wace is going to have a breakout game here pretty soon. He's going to have to. He's just too good not to.
I agree. I hope we see him a lot in the red zone. I think that's where he's going to do his most damage with his size. He is the biggest receiver that Oklahoma puts out there. He is the tallest. He is the wide receiver with that size that gets the most reps. Raiden Willis gets reps, and they're probably pretty comparable in stature. He's really the only one that would take away any targets from him right now. If we see Jaden Gibson start coming in, then Theo Weiss is definitely I could see him starting to get phased out of the game plan. But I just don't think that's the case right now. All right. Recruiting talk. Big things happening, right, Brum? Big things happening. So we have David Hicks, huge target, number one defensive lineman in the country. I believe he's like the number 8 player. Somewhere around there, top 10 player in the country, 5-star. Moved up his commitment date to Wednesday when it was expected that he was going to be committing in January during the Under Armour game, I believe.
Yeah.
I think that's big. We saw Todd Bates was at his game last night. Long night for Todd. Hopefully he was able to get out of there early so he could be rested for today. I mean, what do you think? You're kind of our recruiting expert here.
And some people looking from the outside in, David Hicks did go to Texas A&M the last 2 times. His last 2 visits were at A&M. One of those times was when Texas A&M lost to Appalachian State. So that probably didn't help them at all. And I really think what it was that Hicks has been locked in with Oklahoma for the past few months as far as really liking them. I'm not saying that he's committed or silently committed or anything like that, but I think he really started liking Oklahoma right around that July Party in the Palace deal. And he always had liked Oklahoma because Todd Bates and Venables had been recruiting him for forever. Hicks and Todd Bates and his family, Bates and Hicks's family, really, really are close. They're the closest relationship. And this is where the relationship is really paying off because at the end of the day, if Todd Bates wasn't here, I don't think Hicks would commit to Oklahoma. And I think the same could be said for like Derek LeBlanc as well. That's how impactful Todd Bates is to this staff and to these kids. I think he was going to Texas A&M to just make sure that, like, hey, am I missing something about Texas A&M? And I think after his few visits, I think he realized he's like, there's no point in me dragging this out. Texas A&M is not where I want to be. I don't want to go 8-4, 9-3 every single season. I've got a great relationship and even a better relationship than anyone at Todd Bates at Oklahoma. Um, I would be shocked if Hicks does not pick Oklahoma. I think he's a lock. I think it's there's no way he doesn't pick Oklahoma, and I might look like an idiot. That's fine, but I mean, we got I want to hear your take on it, but isn't it weird? It's hard for me to even wrap my mind around that we're talking about the Oklahoma as the clear leader for the number one defensive lineman in the country. Within less than a year of Brent Venables and his staff being here, Oklahoma's about to lock down the number one defensive lineman in the country.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, when everything happened at the end of last year, clearly the fan base, not huge fans of Lincoln Riley, still not. But I think we can look back and at least try to admit, like, yes, he's a good offensive coach, but he wasn't the guy that's going to get us to the promised land of getting that national championship. I think Todd Bates here is the biggest impact into why Oklahoma is in this position of recruiting defensive linemen so quickly. If Todd Bates would not have been the guy to come in that Brent Venables would have brought in, I don't know that we'd be recruiting this big of talent so early. Maybe taking one more year, depending on who would have brought in instead. Todd Bates is, luckily we got Todd. Luckily he had these relationships established with the players and the families, so they all feel comfortable with being led by Todd, being coached by Todd, being mentored by him throughout their college experience. And what's been established at Oklahoma over the last 9-10 months with Venables at the helm, he's put together a program. And the football aside, right? Football, I think we're all excited about he's putting out on the field. But football aside, he's putting out a program and a message to players and their families. Our goal isn't just to make you the best football player, but to prepare you for what's next after football. Because I think as much as all of these guys have a dream of being in the NFL, at some point in their time in college, they will realize that maybe the NFL is not the next step for them. And Venables is preparing them for that conversation. More than likely going to have a lot of those conversations when a lot of those guys get to their junior year, senior year, maybe even their sophomore year. Could it be something that early for depending on the player? And the programs that he's established are big time for that. And hope we've gotten the opportunity to talk to some of the 2023 recruits. Bates mentioned that up front. I'm not sure. I wasn't on the Ozida interview, but maybe you can recall that a lot of these guys have mentioned the soul mission. That's been a big thing that they've really liked. I think that a mix of that, what Venables has established with Todd Bates being one of the best recruiters, if not the best recruiter in the country, is what is helping Oklahoma put together a top 5 class, maybe even a top 3 class when it's all said and done in the 2023 cycle.
Yeah, and let's be honest, Oklahoma is not going to be able to get the number one recruiting class. Like at one point we thought that there was a path, and that path included Jordan Renaud. But Jordan Renaud ultimately picked Alabama, and Alabama also picked up Jalen Hale, which at one point Oklahoma was really in on with Lincoln Riley and them, and then somehow it drifted away because I think Lincoln thought he could go elsewhere, and then that just drifted away. And then I thought Hale was going to go to Texas, and then Alabama came in and swooped him up. So Alabama's running away with the number one class. Now you look 2 through 7, it's razor thin. Notre Dame lost a commitment, and it's an offensive tackle, and I think he's actually trending towards USC. I think Notre Dame is starting to get a little – they're starting to feel the pressure a little bit, the poor start that they've gotten off to. I know Jimmy Satterfield asks us when is McDonald, and he's talking about Caden McDonald visiting. Caden McDonald will be visiting officially for the Kansas game. There's going to be a handful of guys that are going to be taking the official visit for the Kansas game. So McDonald is definitely being heavily recruited by Oklahoma, especially whenever they lost out on Jordan Renaud. So McDonald's definitely on their radar. But as far as Hicks goes, and what's crazy is we thought whenever Venables let Calvin Thibodeau go, Coach Thibs, we thought that was crazy because Coach Thibs was solid. He was developing the guys. He was really good. And whenever he got let go, we're like, what is going on? I mean, what's he going to do? And then he brings in Todd Bates, and then we're like, okay, wait a minute. He knows what he's doing. And not that Coach Thibs isn't good. He is good. It's just that Todd Bates is just a little bit higher, and he knew what kind of relationships that Todd Bates had while he was at Clemson because he was recruiting all these kids for Clemson at one point. So David Hicks should be a part of Oklahoma, Oklahoma's 2023 class, and the fact that he hasn't even taken an official visit and he's probably going to commit, I would imagine he's going to commit. That's pretty strong. And I'd imagine that he'll take an official visit either for the Kansas game, the Baylor game, or Bedlam. One of the three. I know he's announced for the Bedlam game. It very well might be earlier though, because there's going to be some official visitors for the Kansas game, like Caden McDonald, and I think Derek LeBlanc's going to be there, so they might be turning into more of a recruiters themselves. It just probably depends whenever the staff wants him to take it to have him there to recruit to join his class. Someone I also want to talk about along that defensive line, and I think that we're going to see some steam start to pick up with him, is Johnny Bowens. Johnny Bowens, obviously Oklahoma lost out on Jordan Renaud, and that is what it is, and I can't fault the kid. I'm just glad that he made his decision and, he can stick with it. Not saying that Oklahoma won't circle back down, towards the end of the season to make sure that he's locked in with Alabama. I'm sure he will be. It's ultimately hard to beat Alabama for a commitment, let alone trying to get a kid to flip and decommit. But so the next guy outside of Caden McDonald, and I think Caden McDonald's a take no matter what, and I think Johnny Bowens is a take no matter what. So Johnny Bowens, he's a 6'2", 265-pound defensive lineman from Converse, Texas, 2023 4-star. He's a number 200. He's a top 250 player in the country. He's teammates with Anthony Evans. He's coming up this weekend with Anthony Evans, and Bowens was once committed to Texas A&M, and he ultimately decided to decommit from there. Smart guy. I can't blame him. But he's coming up, and as soon as he decommitted the next day or the day of, I can't remember, it was either the day of or the next day, he announced that he received an Oklahoma offer. And, it's with that, Oklahoma coming right in with an offer right after that, I feel like that's pretty big time. And the fact that they're getting him on campus, from my understanding, the very first time, and Anthony Evans is in his ear, and that's why it was also huge to land Anthony Evans instead of, let him go to Georgia. I think you're going to see Oklahoma really try to go after Johnny Bowens. And I think he'd be a huge addition in this class. While maybe he's not the highest rated guy, compared to Jordan Renaud, he's still a 4-star at the end of the day, and you're not going to turn 4 stars around. He's 6'2", 265. Do you have any thoughts on Bowens?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be probably a guy that Oklahoma they definitely wanted him, but were waiting on Renaud's decision. I think if Renaud would have picked Oklahoma, would we have liked to add in a Bowens? Yes. But are there other talents that Oklahoma probably would have taken over him? More than likely, McDonald more than likely would have been the take over Johnny Bowens. Not that Bowens is a bad player by any means. I think that, you can only have so many people, right? Especially at the defensive line spot. They ended up recruiting it pretty well to round out the 2022 class in the short time that they had. And they're putting together a pretty good class in this 2023 run, and it looks to be potentially even better in 24. So, I think that Bowens is. I would like to think that he leans to Oklahoma after this weekend, especially again, like you mentioned, Anthony Evans is a friend of his, a teammate of his in high school. I think that connection is going to play a lot of impact here, especially since they're both coming together, to this game. Anthony Evans will get to show him around, to introduce him to some of the guys that are going to be there that are already in the 23 class, and introduce him to the coaches. More importantly, make him feel comfortable with the people he's going to be with every single day for the next 3 or 4 years, maybe 5 years, depending on how his college career ends up. But he's going to spend a lot of time with these people, and if he doesn't feel comfortable with them or like them, more than likely not going to be a Sooner. So I think that's the biggest thing here for this weekend. Anthony Evans, just getting him comfortable with Norman, the coaches, the players that are already in the class, the players that they're recruiting to try to be in the class. You just got to make him feel comfortable and at home at the end of the day.
Yeah, and ultimately, I hope after this visit, we see an official visit get scheduled. Hopefully for the Kansas game or the Bedlam game, one of the two games. Honestly, hopefully the Kansas game. If Derek LeBlanc and David Hicks will be at the Kansas game, or if it's at Bedlam or wherever they're going to be, whenever those two guys visit, or at least one of them, they need to be there when Johnny Bowen shows up. And because you not only do you have the coaches recruiting them hard, and I get that, but at the end of the day, when you've got peers in your class recruiting you personally and like convincing you why you should be at Oklahoma because they like Oklahoma for X, Y, and Z, that can push kids over the top. And when you've got the top of the top at the position in the class telling that to you, you have to listen. So I'm hoping that we see an official visit get set up for Johnny Bowens after this. I think if you do see that, I think ultimately you can think that Oklahoma might have taken a lead in this recruitment. But if you don't see an official visit, that might be something. I did see that Jenna mentioned that Bowens is an A&M lean according to 247, and I don't know about the dates of those crystal balls. But I know he was once committed to Texas A&M, and I just don't know if they've ever changed him since he's decommitted. But ultimately, I do think it changes. I think Oklahoma very well might take the lead.
Those crystal balls for Johnny Bowens were old. I looked at his profile; they're older. Definitely, it's just they just haven't changed him.
Okay. Yeah, so I mean, it doesn't seem like he's taken. I haven't been following his recruitment the closest. I know I kind of got to know him a little bit, or kind of started doing some research once Oklahoma offered him, but it seemed like he kind of fell off the radar because I think Oklahoma felt really good about Jordan Renaud and ultimately kind of prioritized him. So now Oklahoma might have a little ground to make up, but I don't think it's going to be very hard for Oklahoma to make it up. Let's move on to another, talk about a whole high school, Geyer High School in Denton, Texas. Did you see the game at all last night? I didn't watch it, but I watched some highlights and things like that. Jackson Arnold, he's throwing dimes out there. Peyton Bowen had a kickoff or a punt return for a touchdown. Geyer rolled last night, per usual. But there's supposed to be a couple guys that are, it's not 100%. I don't know for sure, but, from my understanding that Peyton Bowen and Eli Bowen should be there at Oklahoma, Kansas State today. And they were torn between going to Texas A&M, Arkansas, which is in, Jerry's World in Dallas, or going up to Norman and making the trip for the OU Kansas State game. And I would like to think that they're going to make the trip, and Eli Bowen is obviously his younger brother, 2024 four-star cornerback, someone that Oklahoma is recruiting extremely hard, and and Eli is extremely high on Oklahoma as well. I think that the way that it's trending and the way that A&M is struggling, and for everyone that's watching this that's an Oklahoma fan, we're all Arkansas fans today. We are all hardcore Arkansas fans today. Because if Arkansas rolls in, I think Arkansas should beat A&M, and I know that they're not ultimately the betting favorite. I think Arkansas beats Texas A&M today. But you see potentially Texas A&M losing another game or two. I think you're going to see Peyton Bowen and Eli Bowen realize, okay, wait a minute, I don't want to go to Texas A&M. Notre Dame's struggling, Texas A&M struggling, OU's rolling. I really think the way that they play on the field, all these schools play on the field, have a huge impact on the Bowens. And I think that OU, the way that they've started, has really put them ahead. And I think that Peyton Bowen could be flipping. I think if David Hicks commits to Oklahoma as he should, I think that's going to turn up the heat on Peyton Bowen tremendously and make him think like, okay, maybe I should flip as well. What do you think?
I mean, with Peyton Bowen, I think it's just a tough one to predict. We've read and expected him to flip multiple times now, since the beginning of the football season, let alone since the summer. I think at the beginning of the summer, he was expected to make a decision on if he was going to flip or not. Then it was midsummer. Then it was the end of July during the party at the Palace. None of those happened, clearly. Then I believe it was game one when he visited. Some people expected him to make a decision on if he was flipping or not. Clearly did not happen. He's just visiting a lot. I think that's just one that's going to take some time. If he's very talented and Oklahoma's going to take him, I think we're no matter what. But at some point, Oklahoma will start to press other safeties if Bowen doesn't make a decision soon. So hopefully he flips. I think Hicks committing to Oklahoma on Wednesday would be big for him, but not as big as Billy Bowman continuing to have big games, because I think he is putting Oklahoma in a position to start getting some of these, more talented 4 or 5 star safeties. Looking at Oklahoma, the defensive line, Todd Bates, there's a reason. Brandon Hall is a very good coach, and we talked about him a lot whenever all the coaching hiring was happening at the beginning of the year. I think outside of Todd Bates, he was the more experienced and proven position coach. So he knows what he's doing. I just think that guys needed to see it on the field because they weren't too aware of who he was potentially. I think he was at Temple, if I remember it. He was at a smaller program before coming to Oklahoma. So
I know he's at Troy.
Troy. I knew Troy. It was a smaller program for sure. Guys just wanted to see what the product looked like, and Billy Bowman is performing at he's at the end of the year. I wouldn't be surprised if he is we're starting to hear some buzz about him being a first round draft pick if he continues this trajectory he's on with this year, because he was a co-leader in tackles for games 1 and 2, had a big impact in game 3. If he can be a big reason why Oklahoma wins today, maybe start getting some turnovers. I know he did get the fumble, but I'm talking about picks. We're tough to say that there's a part of his game that is a weakness at this point.
I agree. It is tough to say what a weakness is of Billy Bowman's play on the field is. I know that Billy Bowman is putting full court press on Peyton Bowen to convince him, hey, look at me. I'm excelling in this defense. You can do the same. So do I expect to flip immediately? No, but the fact that if he picks going to the Oklahoma game rather than going to the Arkansas A&M game, which is literally right down the road from him, Denton to Jerry's World is not very far. I mean, he's having to drive a little bit further. His parents are anyway. I think that speaks a lot, and I think his girlfriend's going to convince him that he needs to be at Oklahoma because she's going to go play soccer at OU. I'm not saying it's going to happen right away, but it's just the more that this drags on, if Notre Dame struggles, A&M struggles, Oklahoma excels, I just feel like that ultimately it's going to be too tough for him to turn this down. And I think Oklahoma wins out on Peyton Bowen. So now we'll move on to another guy in Ryan Yates, another one of his teammates, another one of Jackson Arnold's teammates. He's coming off of a visit to LSU. And LSU obviously was trailing Mississippi State for a bit, but they ultimately won that game. But Ryan Yates is another safety, 6 foot, 190 pounds, 2023 4-star. He's a top, 250 player in the country. And he's coming up with his family this weekend. And from my understanding, and I might be totally wrong, but I believe that this is the first time that his parents are coming with him up here, or at least maybe one of his parents or some. It's his parents are coming up for. They haven't been up hardly at all, if they ever have ever been. The fact that he went to a visit to LSU last weekend, and LSU could not convince him to say, "Hey, shut it down, commit to the Tigers, commit to the program, and you're done." I think the fact that he is showing up with his parents this weekend screams he's not locked in with LSU. And I'm not saying he's going to flip today, but you got Jackson Arnold in his ear. You've got LSU they struggled a little bit. I mean, they're winning as of recently, but OU's recruiting him extremely hard. I just feel like that if you're getting your parents to go up with you to the game after visiting LSU, there's something there. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. The parents, grandparents, when family starts to join in, and not just, I think clearly for the most part, there's at least one parent with the players almost every single time. But when it's both parents, grandparents starting to come with them, especially multiple times, that's when these visits become more serious, because now the parents want to feel comfortable that their child is going to be put in the hands of someone that they trust, will coach them to the best of their ability, and make them the best player they can be. And again, going back to all of those programs that Venables is establishing with Soul Mission, and all the things outside of football, making him a good person, a good student, someone prepared for life after college. I think all that stuff is when that it's discussed when mom and dad or grandma and grandpa, whoever is the guardians for these players, come in and have those conversations with the coaches. Hopefully Yates, we do hear some good stuff about Yates. I know when we talked about it in yesterday's video, we expected a potential flip watch. Can't say that for 100% sure, since things happen all the time, but definitely something that Oklahoma and fans need to be looking at after this weekend, because that would be a big addition. I think Yates flipping will have a lot more impact on Bowen than Hicks, the potential addition of Hicks on Wednesday.
Yeah. I also saw just a question that just came in from David Whitehead. Do we have any other safeties we're recruiting other than Yates? Yeah, Oklahoma is recruiting a guy by the name. He's in the St. Louis or Kansas City area. I can't remember. I believe his name is Marvin Burks Jr., I want to say. I believe, Marvin Burks Jr. Yeah, he's from St. Louis. He's a 2023 four-star as well. Maybe not quite highly as rated, but he's 6'2", 190. I kind of think that he might be a take no matter what. If he wants to commit, because Oklahoma, at the end of the day, safety is a position where it's a little thin. It's talented at the top, but they need the depth. So I know that they're recruiting Burks Jr. there. Also, they are recruiting. There's another guy that they're recruiting. I believe he's committed to TCU right now, and his name hang on, give me 2 seconds. I can't remember. Rohan Flulin. He's from Gilmer, Texas. He's a 3-star. I don't think he's a take for Oklahoma right now, but ultimately, if things kind of fall apart, also I know Conrad Hussey. I think he's committed to Penn State. I know they've been talking with him. So let's see. Yates, we talked about Peyton Bowen. PJ Adebore is showing up today, which is always good to see. Anthony Evans, as we talked about, is going to be there. I think another guy that's interesting to talk about, and someone that we haven't talked about in a while because we thought it was dead, is Micah Tease. Micah Tease. We talk about Micah Tease like almost, it felt like every week or every other week for a few months there, and he ultimately committed to Arkansas, excuse me. And he's from Booker T. Washington here in Tulsa. 5'11", 180-pound guy he's a 2023 4-star, number 174 overall player, committed to Arkansas because he wanted to play wide receiver, and Oklahoma saw Tease as a defensive back. Well, Tease is showing up this weekend. And I don't think Oklahoma's thoughts on what position he's going to play has changed. But I just wonder if Tease has seen the way that this defense has gone or it's performing, and maybe he's second guessing. Maybe he's thinking, wait a minute, maybe I can go play as a defensive back at Oklahoma and be a part of this 2023 class and be highly developed and become a great prospect for the NFL. I don't know how much I'm putting weight, how much weight I'm putting into this visit, but there's got to be something going on there. If you're going to show up and you're committed to Arkansas and it's coming out of nowhere, what do you think? Hey, you're muted.
Yep. Maybe I think coaches are starting to see him more at the wide receiver position. I mean, that is why he ended up not committing to Oklahoma, is because Oklahoma wanted him to play corner. He wanted to play wide receiver. Arkansas gave him that opportunity. Luke Haas is at Arkansas. I'm sure that they're friends growing up in Tulsa. So I think that's ultimately the biggest change. Coaches, I mean, now it's LaDainian Washington recruiting him. Maybe they have a better connection there. Maybe that's something that could pay. That is helping out. And Mike T is entertaining the possibility of being at Oklahoma again. A lot of factors go into the situation. I just think that I don't put too much stock in him visiting. Is it cool? Yes. Could something come out of it? Potentially. But players go take visits, go watch games, for free all the time. Not an unheard of thing. I'm sure people are going to be raging if there isn't any news of him potentially flipping, saying that he's taking advantage of the program or Oklahoma. Not really the case. I mean, we saw Colton Vasek went to Texas just to watch the Texas-Alabama game. It happens. Not a huge deal. I mean, it'd be cool to have. I just don't know how much it actually means right now. I think we'll have to be tracking it. If he comes back for Bedlam, or if he makes the trip down to Dallas, if he can take a visit to that, then I would be taking this visit as visit number 1 more seriously.
Yeah, and I just don't know if Oklahoma is really going to recruit him at the wide receiver position after picking up 3 wide receivers, and they might. I don't know. That's the only thing.
Well,
is what
we're going, Coach Finley going to see Jaden Greathouse. I think they might be looking for another wide receiver, right?
Well, that's the thing, is now it's going down to Jalen Greathouse versus Malachi Coleman, because I think we've talked about this. For some reason, Oklahoma has not allowed Malachi Coleman to schedule an official visit quite yet. They're kind of in a standoff. I think Parker Thune was talking about it on the live stream that 247 put on. They're in a weird standoff right now, and I don't quite understand why, because I feel like Malachi Coleman is a take no matter what. But yeah, not Jaden Greathouse, excuse me. But yeah, so Joe John Finley went down to Jaden Greathouse's game last night. Greathouse is currently committed to Notre Dame, so we're circling back on another Notre Dame commit. 6'2", 215-pound wide receiver from Westlake High in Austin, Texas. He's a 4-star kid. And Joe John Finley went down there and obviously went and visited. There must be some communication going on there. It must be somewhat receptive of the fact that, potentially, being interested in Oklahoma. I think the fact that Notre Dame has stumbled a bit has helped Oklahoma, obviously with Peyton Bowen, but maybe it's also starting to work with him for Greathouse. I don't know. I don't know what they're doing with Malachi Coleman. I feel like Malachi Coleman's a take no matter what. I'm hoping to see an official visit get scheduled. But what's going to be interesting to see is can Oklahoma get Jay Greathouse on campus for a game? Can they get him on campus for the Kansas game? Excuse me. I don't know if they can or if they will. But but obviously there's some sort of communication there. And Notre Dame's class the wheels might start falling off. If they lose another game, I mean, they barely beat Cal. If it starts, the wheels start falling off, it could be in trouble.
Yeah,
And
I
agree,
agree. I
Jason.
mean, that's the biggest thing with Notre Dame right now. It's not just Bowens and Greathouse that are questioning their commitment to Notre Dame. We saw Keon Keeley, the probably one of the biggest reasons why a lot of those guys committed. They had one of the best prospects in the 23 class committed there. He leaves, and then we start to see the wheels fall off. Then season starts, and we're seeing Marcus Freeman is struggling, in year one as being a head coach at Notre Dame. I don't see them having a losing record, but just because their schedule is never really the toughest of schedules. Yeah, they do have some good games, but like I don't know. I just don't think Notre Dame is the Notre Dame it has been under Brian Kelly.
Brian Kelly.
But who knows? I mean, maybe it's just a stumble before coming out the gates hot. Doubt it for this year, but who knows? Maybe he turns it around for next year.
Yeah, I'm looking at Notre Dame's schedule. I mean, they play today at North Carolina. North Carolina can't play defense. I mean, let's be honest, they can't play defense, but they can score a lot of points. Then they play BYU. Both those games are losable games for them. They've got Clemson and USC on the schedule as well. Stanford is always a close game, and Stanford's not even that great. Yeah, they've got Syracuse, but Syracuse won last night. Syracuse is 4-0. I don't know if anyone watched that game, but that was painful to watch. Syracuse, Virginia, that was not high quality football, but it was entertaining. And then they've got Navy. So there is a way that they go 7-5, and that's not going to keep you a number 2, number 5 class in the country. If you go 7-5, that's not a great look for them. And so if they drop this game today, the wheels. I mean, Vegas has UNC as a 2.5-point favorite. So I mean, it's not looking the best for them.
Yeah, Notre Dame's offense just isn't that great. Their defense isn't bad. They just can't put up any points. So if UNC is that high caliber offense that they can put out there, it's gonna be tough to win.
Yeah.
If their team can't score any points.
Yeah. So we'll kind of do more of this last bit of recruiting talk as far as there's too many guys for us to talk about. If we were talking about every single guy, we would be probably on for about 3 hours and just go on and on. But I will say is the 2020, there's a ton of 23 kids, a ton of 24 kids, and a ton of 25 kids. And granted, you probably should be following us on Twitter because we'll be tweeting out and quote tweeting everything that all these kids probably post pictures of and whatnot. But a couple of the big guys that'll be on campus for the 24 class is Micah Hudson. He's a 2024 5-star wide receiver. You got 2024 4-star Nigel Smith. He's a defensive lineman from Melissa, Texas. Oklahoma's in a great spot with him. 2024 4-star Aiden Breland's going to be there as well. We talked about him a little bit in the recruiting video from Friday. He's from Mater Dei High School. He's a top 10 defensive lineman in the country. Potentially, the OU's leader is Michael Hawkins, 2024 4-star quarterback. He's an OU legacy. He's going to be on campus today, and then there's going to be a ton of other guys in the 24. And then the 2025 classes, there's 4-stars, 5-stars all over the place, guys that haven't been rated yet because it is the 25 class and they're just sophomores. But a lot of guys from California. And I think we can just kind of group this into one discussion is there's a lot of guys that are coming out from California, from Mater Dei High School or from Sacramento or Pittsburgh, Kansas, Pittsburgh, California, excuse me. A lot of 4-stars, a lot of 5-stars. And I think it's Oklahoma's hosting in the 2025 class for the top 10 players in the state of California this weekend. And it's obviously all unofficially. These kids are coming out hoping to earn offers, which I'd imagine most of them will get offers from Oklahoma. So they're all making the trip out. I think that's huge. It's obviously Oklahoma's recruiting at a, it's a wide scale national recruiting brand, but I think Oklahoma's really going to make themselves known in California. They always have, but I think it's an emphasis in the fact that you're getting all these kids on campuses big time.
Yeah, that modern day pipeline is getting constructed this weekend. We're seeing, we saw in this recruiting cycle, Venables and the staff focus in the southeast part of the country. A lot of Florida, tons of Florida kids getting recruited. Now I think we saw them. They went all over the country, but Florida was a big target for them this year. I think that's going to stay true for as long as these probably for the next 4 or 5 years, because a lot of them have established relationships with players down there since Venables and Bates and Chavis were at Clemson prior. So wouldn't expect that to really change, but they're trying to expand out west, start getting some of those California kids, because they do have a lot of talent out there. And we're Bryce Young, California, DJ Uyunglele, I believe, is also from California. Some big time quarterbacks out there. Not just can't stick to Texas for the foreseeable future. You gotta expand, right?
Yep, for sure. And I also saw that Jenna asked about Peyton Pierce. He should be there today, 2024 four-star linebacker. I think Oklahoma is the leader there. I believe his family has the University of Oklahoma ties. I definitely think that Oklahoma is the leader, and maybe he's an early commit, one of the early commits in the 2024 class to Oklahoma. But, I'm not expecting that to happen this fall. It might be next spring and do that. So JB is definitely true. Yeah, we appreciate that for sure. And I'll take a second. I'm pretty good at plugging it. Be sure, if you're new around here or if you've been on the edge, just hit the subscribe button. It helps us out a lot. Also, like this video so more people can see this pop up on their feed. It helps us out a lot. Everything's free, and be sure to check out our membership if you'd like to help support. And we like to give away tickets and things like that in there. So let's kind of move on to just a couple general college football games that we'd like to talk about. There's going to be a lot of recruiting talk. We'll probably have another video coming out on that next week, maybe Monday or Wednesday, to talk about all these kids that visited. There's just too much to cover in one, in this show. My first game I want to talk about is Clemson Wake Forest. This was one of the games that I, did my bet on in our Friday game. It starts here in about 50 minutes, and it's a top 25 matchup. Clemson, the last time I checked, they were a 7-point favorite. I don't know if that line has moved or not, but I do think that Clemson, a lot of people are starting to second guess Clemson, and I understand that DJ Uiagalelei hasn't looked his best, but I just don't think that Wake Forest is going to have the guys that can match up against them whenever Clemson's playing defense. That offensive line for Wake Forest, I think, is going to be having tremendous issues today. I think Clemson is going to be able to take care of Wake Forest. I expect it to be somewhat close in the beginning, but I understand it's on the road at Wake and weird things happen at Wake Forest, but I just feel like that Clemson will go in. I think DJ Uiagalelei will look pretty strong today, or maybe not. I'm not saying he's going to look as, the best quarterback on Saturday today, but I think he's going to look pretty solid, and I think Clemson wins by a couple touchdowns. What do you think?
I don't think Clemson wins by – I don't think Clemson covers the spread. I think Wake Forest's offense is good enough to put up points on them, and Clemson's offense is not good enough to consistently put up points for them. So expect it to be a close game. Yeah, I think Jenna actually has a pretty – I think that's actually pretty close to where I would predict their score, 28-24, 21-18. I could see it being pretty low scoring too. I just don't think these two teams are as far apart as the spread indicates them to be. Wake Forest beat them last year, and it's essentially the defense is definitely better for Clemson, but their offense no change really. The only reason I could see Clemson coming out and having an explosive offense is if Dabo, for some reason, makes the decision at some point today, maybe at halftime, to change it to Cade Klubnik. Cade Klubnik being a top-rated quarterback in his class, going over to Clemson. Maybe he can provide more of a vertical threat for that offense, but with DJ Uiagalelei, just don't see that happening. Not sure why, but it just doesn't seem like that offense rolls with him at the quarterback position, which is weird because if we remember back when he came in for Trevor Lawrence during I can't remember if Trevor was hurt or suspended for that game, but he put up an absolute show against Notre Dame. And that Notre Dame team was good that year.
Yeah, for sure. Another game, is worth mentioning is Florida, Tennessee. That's on CBS at 2:30. I don't know. I don't know what to expect out of this game, to be completely honest with you. I think Florida can go in and beat them, but then I could also see Tennessee taking care of them as well. I think Anthony Richardson could have a good game today. I just think it's going to be a close game. I did not want to bet this game because I didn't really know which way it could go. You just never know which team's going to show up. I just have a hard time believing that Tennessee's the 11th best team in the country after, playing Ball State, Pitt, and Akron. I just don't know if I necessarily believe the Vols, and they always seem to get hyped up. They're kind of like Texas in a way where, they have a rich history and they get pumped up and then they just kind of fall flat on their face.
I'm going to agree with JB here. I think Florida is a fraud. They got lucky to win against Utah. Anthony Richardson, week 1, looked like a really good quarterback. Since then, really hasn't done anything. I don't think he's even thrown a touchdown since week 1. So not a great start for Anthony Richardson. Yeah, he hasn't. Against Kentucky, he had 141 yards, 0 touchdowns, and 2 picks. Yeah. And then against South Florida, they escaped that with a win at home. Really doesn't make any sense if Florida's supposed to be the number 18 team in the country. And Gary Bohannon, not a great game. Another reason why he shouldn't have been the quarterback at Oklahoma. But Anthony Richardson, 112 yards and another 2 picks. I think Anthony Richardson just, unless he comes out like a man possessed and he becomes the next coming of Joe Montana or Tom Brady or Aaron Rodgers, that shit's not happening. Tennessee has a good enough offense that they're going to put up a lot of points, and if Anthony Richardson continues to have this struggle, that Florida has 0 chance. And I could definitely see Tennessee covering. I think right now it's at 10.5. Definitely possible, but it is a rivalry game. So maybe the crowd plays a big. Well, I guess it's at Tennessee. So yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and pick Tennessee. It's not a pick for one of the picks of the weekend for me, but since we're talking about it, I'll take Tennessee here by the 10.5. I just think that offense is too good and Richardson stinks.
Yeah, he definitely had his one game. We'll see if he shows up for this. I don't know. I have a hard time believing Tennessee, and I get it. And on paper, Tennessee should take care of them for sure. But I don't know. I go back and forth with it. Another game is we talked about a little bit earlier is Texas A&M. Geez, at Jerry's World, another rivalry game. I put Arkansas to be a top 10 team, in preseason rankings, and they're at 10 now. Arkansas obviously flirted with disaster last weekend against Missouri State, but they finally pulled away. Arkansas with KJ Jefferson, they can score the ball, and Texas A&M has shown that they have struggled to score. They just don't. They just can't put it all together for whatever reason. And in the last 2 games, Texas A&M in the last 2 games has scored 14 points and 9 points, or 14 and 17. 14 and 17. that's not going to be enough to beat Arkansas. I think Arkansas's defensive backs are horrendous. The defensive backfield is not good for Arkansas. So is this a game where Texas A&M can get get everything on track and get it rolling? Maybe, but I think Arkansas wins it, and I know Arkansas is technically an underdog +2, according to Vegas. And to be honest with you, I'd love to actually add this game to my bets. I would take Arkansas +2 points.
Yeah, I had them. I took them. Yeah, I also got them at +2.5. Yeah, even if Arkansas has 0 defensive backs out on the field, I don't think it matters because Texas A&M's quarterback and passing offense is worse than Florida's somehow. They stink. Haynes King, I know is not the quarterback. I believe it's still Max Johnson is carrying over from the last game. Still stinks. Jimbo Fisher can't put out a good offense. They suck. Defense, not terrible, but if Arkansas took anything away from that App State versus A&M game, they see that if they can run the ball successfully, which they're good at running the ball, they have a good running back, and KJ Jefferson's biggest weapon is his legs, and when it comes to making plays, they can keep the ball for a long time. And their defense is good enough, especially the front. Drew Sanders, I think, can make an impact in this game. He had an impact against South Carolina. Their defensive line is talented enough where they're going to put pressure on Max Johnson. As long as they can stop A&M's run, really don't see this being that much of a game when it's all said and done. I think maybe the score sheet will say something different, but I do believe Arkansas wins. So we'd win the bet, but A&M, I've said it all week, is the Dallas Cowboys of college football. Overhyped and underperforms. Always going to be the average team.
Yep. And then the last game that I would like to talk about, and any other ones that you would like to, is we have to talk a little USC Oregon State. And I will say that this is going to be by far the toughest test that USC has had to date. They're going on the road at Oregon State. Oregon State's 3-0 as well. USC's a 5.5-point favorite tonight. And obviously they're playing on the Pac-12 network, which no one watches and no one gets. It starts at 8:30. But I just think that Oregon State, they've got what it takes to give USC troubles. I think USC could be overlooking and, kind of sleepwalking. And I just think, Oregon State can score the ball. I mean, they played Boise State, Fresno State, Montana State. They've scored 34, 35, and 68 points. It's Montana State, I understand. But they're at home. It's at night. I'm not saying that USC loses. I'm just saying it's going to be a tight game. And if the offense for USC is off, they have an off game, Oregon State can score, and then they could be playing from behind, and it might be tough on USC to win it. What do you think?
This is the smallest line USC has had in any game, so Vegas expects it to be pretty close. The fact that it's away may be a big deal. I was watching something earlier in the week, and they mentioned that I guess the weather isn't great. Like the air conditions aren't amazing up in the area where Oregon State is, so a little tough to breathe. Could be pretty low scoring. Really, as long as Oregon State can play a clean game, and by clean, minimal to 0 turnovers, it forces USC to put up long drives. And that's, I haven't been watching much USC, really any. I've seen little bits here and there. If I go out to dinner or something on a Saturday, but Oregon or USC, very much like Oklahoma under Lincoln Riley, puts up quick, explosive offensive drives. Never really a lot of methodical drives down the field. Rarely did you see those. A lot more big plays. Jordan Addison has been a big weapon for him. Really, that Caleb Williams to Jordan Addison connection has paid a lot of dividends for him. but the games wouldn't look so like blowouts if the opposing team would have just been able to play a little bit more clean, not turn the ball over so much. As long as Oregon State has a game manager at the quarterback, they'll be just fine. It should be pretty close. I don't know if I would take them to win because as much as we hate it, USC is a good football program right now. It is going to be a lot closer, and people are going to start to question USC in the more national media because their defense, much like Oklahoma's defense over the last 3 or 4 years, sucks.
It does. So, do you have any other games you want to talk about?
No, I think we hit on all of them. Pretty successful stream, don't you think?
Yeah, I thought it was great. Do you want to take maybe a couple more minutes and we'll take a few questions and then wrap it up?
Sure. If there's any games you guys want to chat about or have us chat about, throw them in the chat. If there's any questions you guys have, throw them in the chat. I'll scroll through here real quick, see if there's anything we missed. We try to get to the questions throughout the stream as much as possible. Sorry if we missed it. We get into our conversation. But someone asked, Shane Moore, not sure if they're still in, but asked about landing David Hicks. We talked about it earlier in the stream. It seems like Oklahoma is definitely the place where he's landing. Crystal balls are still rolling in for him landing at Oklahoma. The existing crystal balls never moved. So, really, I think we both expect him to be a Sooner. We just kind of wait and see. Anything can happen. We saw Anthony Evans. I think he's the best example right now. Was going to be a dog the morning of his commitment. Ended up picking the Sooners when he had to make the announcement. So anything can happen, but Oklahoma seems to be the leader right there. Can we explain the cheetah position? I don't think either of us are smart enough to do that, to be honest with you, John. So I'm not even going to try to explain it in depth. It's essentially, to me, it's like a hybrid linebacker safety. That's why we have Harrington, who was initially played safety, and White, who was initially a linebacker. Just guys that are super athletic, can be relied on to make tackles and are fast enough to keep up with a guy like a Deuce Vaughn today. So definitely keep an eye on that position today against Deuce Vaughn. Whoever is put in that position to cover him, gonna need to have a big game. Kansas. What's up with Kansas? Could they be undefeated by the time they come to Norman? I don't know if you remember, bro, but we talked about Kansas, I think it was last week, and we went through their schedule. If they get past Duke today, which I think is very possible, I picked them to win. I think Kansas is a favorite right now. When I picked them, they were 7.5-point favorites. I think they can definitely cover that because their offense is good enough. They have a road to being undefeated and it being a ranked matchup against Oklahoma.
They do, and they can score the ball. Obviously, yeah, they're playing Duke today. Then they play Iowa State, which Iowa State, you just never know what you're going to get with the Cyclones, and they're kind of in a rebuilding year. And then they play TCU, which TCU is not a bad team. There is a path. I do agree. There is a path where Kansas goes 6-0 and goes in to play Oklahoma in Norman as a ranked matchup, which is hard for me to wrap my mind around. They finally have passed the crown as the worst FBS football school out there to Colorado, in my opinion. But yeah, Kansas can score the ball. Lance Leopold, he's got his guys ready to go. Daniels, the quarterback, he's protecting the ball. He can run the ball. The guy's passed for over 500 yards. He's ran for over 200 yards. He has 10 total touchdowns through 3 games. Kansas, he's got the guys to finally buy in. And I don't know. If Kansas wins this weekend, which they probably should, they should be a top 25 team. And yeah. Iowa State's not the best. But their quarterback, the reason why that they're playing well is Jalen Daniels. Jalen Daniels is efficient. He's throwing it well. He's seeing the field well. He's completing 67% of his passes. He's got an extremely high rating. Actually, believe it or not, according to ESPN, his QBR rating is the number 1 in the country. Number Pretty 1 good. QBR rating for Kansas football. Just because he's being efficient, he's running the ball, he's And it's not like they've been playing nobody. I mean, they did beat Houston. Houston's not a bad school. They beat West Virginia. You can say what you want about West Virginia. They're not great. But that's a conference matchup. Kansas hasn't been playing like North Institute of Technology Community College.
Yeah, they haven't had Michigan's non-conference schedule.
Yeah, I would say that Kansas's first 3 games are way harder than Michigan's.
Yeah, I don't know. Definitely gonna be something to watch. They're starting to get some eyeballs over to Lawrence and Lance Leopold. Who knows what's gonna happen there? I know he's been rumored to be a target for the Nebraska job. For the good of Kansas sports, because their football program, I think for the first time in 3 years, has sold out a football game. Hopefully he sticks around for a couple of years just to help them establish a real culture as a football program and then move on. I just think it's fun to see them play well. They stink 99% of the time at football, and you really just expect them to be good at basketball. Who knows? Maybe they're going to be the powerhouse of the Big 12 once Oklahoma leaves with Texas to the SEC. Let's see. Here's the last question. Who's the first 24 commit? It's tough to say with Venable's recruiting
Kavion
philosophy.
Henderson.
You're going to pick Kavion? Yeah, I guess
November.
that's the first one that has a commitment date. So, yeah, I think that's a good pick. Probably the most logical pick right now.
Yeah. John Bryan said, "OU Kansas Big 12 final ? Jesus, wouldn't that be something?
That'd definitely be a disappointment to Texas fans. That's another thing. Where does Texas and Kansas play this year? I think they played at Texas last year.
It'll be in Lawrence. Upset alert.
Upset alert of the century. I think that's actually like Texas's defense, like objectively, not shit, but Kansas's offense is good enough. They might put up some points against the Longhorns, and not going to be an easy game there.
Yeah. I know we also had a question about the Baylor-Iowa State game. I picked Baylor plus 2.5. I understand they're going on the road at Iowa State, and they're coming. They lost to BYU. I just, outside of Iowa State, outside of Xavier Hutchinson at the wide receiver position for him, I just don't know. I'm not totally buying into Iowa State. I mean, they beat Iowa 10-7, and then they played Southeast Missouri and Ohio. Baylor lost a heartbreaker to BYU on the road at night. I just think that Baylor is the better team, and I think Baylor wins outright, and that was one of my bets. Give me Baylor plus the points. I feel pretty confident there. Also, someone asked about the Michigan-Maryland game, which is about to start in a half hour. J.J. McCarthy is going to be their starting quarterback. Michigan can throw the ball all over the field. Granted, they played nobody. This will be their first test. I just don't think Maryland will be able to keep up with them at all. I don't think it's going to be a game. I hope I'm wrong. I'd love to see Michigan lose, but Michigan can play, and Michigan's a good team. It's going to be interesting to see what happens.
Yeah, I agree. It's tough to say anything about Maryland right now because I don't know how good Talia Tagovailoa is still. I think he's had really good games and he's had really bad games. And like you said, with Michigan this year, they've probably had the easiest non-conference schedule in the country. So it's really tough to know if they are a very good team or if they've just played very bad teams, which they did play Hawaii. As much as their state is beautiful, they have an absolutely garbage football program.
Yeah. So, but I think that's about it.
I think it's a good place to wrap it up. Thank you guys very much for watching. We appreciate it. Enjoy your game day. Have a blast. If you're going to the game, be safe. Download the Oklahoma Sooners app on your phone so you can participate in the light show in the third quarter. Hopefully you can stick around for the entire game. Enjoy College Football Saturday. Have a great NFL Sunday. Make sure to like and subscribe. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. If you listen to podcasts, If you like listening to podcasts better than watching on YouTube, we're on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Go follow us on there. Leave us a rating. All the liking and subscribing and ratings help us out a lot. We appreciate it. Thank you guys again. We'll see you on Monday.